I'm 18, and my stepsister Jade is the human equivalent of a migraine. She's 22, pregnant, and pathologically incapable of letting anyone else have the spotlight. When she hijacked my milestone 18th birthday party, a party my parents threw for me, to announce her baby's gender, I was humiliated. She thought she'd won. She thought I'd just take it. Big mistake. Because Jade had secrets, dark ones, and I knew them all. What happens when you push someone too far? You get an engagement party toast that will go down in family legend. This isn't just about petty revenge. It's about gaslighting, narcissistic abuse within a blended family, and finally drawing a line in the sand. From a ruined birthday in our suburban Austin home to a 5-star restaurant takedown, get ready for a story where the good girl finally bites back and the consequences are explosive. My life in our sprawling Austin, Texas home should have been idyllic. 2-story colonial, sprawling oak in the front yard, the whole 9 yards. Instead, it often felt like a carefully staged battleground, and my primary adversary was my stepsister, Jade. I'm Maya, 18, and Jade, at 22, is a masterclass in narcissism with a minor in petty cruelty. Our feelings are entirely mutual. I'm pretty sure the disdain radiates off us in visible waves. Our parents, my mom and her dad, Richard, married when I was 14 and she was 18. I genuinely tried to build a bridge. I offered olive branches, suggested sisterly bonding activities, complimented her, often questionable, fashion choices. Each attempt was met with a sneer, a dismissive wave, or a backhanded compliment designed to make me feel small. "Oh Maya, that's brave of you to wear that color," she'd say, her lips curling into a smirk. Eventually, I gave up and started mirroring her behavior. Passive-aggressive potshots became our primary mode of communication, much to the discomfort of everyone around us. Our parents would occasionally intervene, forcing a temporary ceasefire, but the underlying animosity always simmered. Jade just couldn't stand not being the center of attention, and I, apparently, was a threat to her perpetually spotlight-starved ego. She crossed a line a few weeks ago, a big, fat, glitter-encrusted line, and I decided I'd finally had enough of her entitled nonsense. It was my 18th birthday, a milestone I'd been looking forward to for ages. The plan was a family and friends celebration at home, followed by my first legal trip to a bar on 6th Street with my crew. Jade, 5 months pregnant and radiating a smug maternal glow that was frankly nauseating, was, of course, present. My mom and Richard had gone all out. They'd shooed me off to my grandparents' house in Fredericksburg for the day so they could decorate in secret. When I returned that evening, the living room was transformed. Elegant streamers, fairy lights, balloons in my favorite shades of teal and silver. It was sophisticated and beautiful, exactly how I'd envisioned it. My mom knows my taste. There was a massive cake, a stunning 3-tiered affair, artfully decorated to look like a stack of my favorite classic novels. It was perfect, meaningful. Then I saw it. Tucked beside my magnificent literary cake was a smaller, almost comically plain vanilla cake with a simple smiley face piped on top. "What's that one?" I asked Mom, a knot of suspicion tightening in my stomach. "Oh honey, Jade brought that," Mom said, a little too brightly. "Isn't that sweet of her? Sweet? Jade bringing a cake to my party? That was about as likely as a Texas summer bringing a blizzard." My internal alarms blared. I could feel Jade's smug gaze on me from across the room, where she stood cradling her baby bump like it was the Hope Diamond. But it was my birthday. I didn't want to cause a scene, didn't want to validate her by overthinking it. So I plastered on a smile and ignored the ominous vanilla cake. A mistake, a huge mistake. Guests arrived, music played, presents were piled high. Eventually it was time for the cake cutting. Everyone gathered, sang happy birthday, and I made a wish, slicing into my glorious book cake. People clapped, cheered, and for a moment it felt like my day. Then, as I was about to offer slices, Jade stepped forward, that self-satisfied smirk firmly in place. "Actually, Maya," she announced, her voice ringing out with faux sweetness, "before you cut that one, I have a little announcement to make." My blood ran cold. I knew. I just knew. This wasn't a little announcement. This was a full-scale hijack. She gestured dramatically to the smiley face cake. "This," she declared, her hand protectively on her stomach, "is actually a gender reveal cake for baby Ashworth." A collective gasp went around the room, followed by excited squeals and applause from our blended family members. My friends, bless their loyal hearts, looked as horrified and disgusted as I felt. They knew Jade. They knew her MO. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the damn vanilla cake onto the floor. I wanted to demand she leave, but I didn't. That's what she wanted, a meltdown, a tantrum, proof that I was the immature one. So I did the hardest thing I've ever done. I kept my cool. I forced a smile that felt like it would crack my face. and I even managed to hug her, a brief tense affair before her doting boyfriend Liam could. She stood there beaming, soaking up the attention, as if this was her party. For the next torturous half hour, my 18th birthday celebration officially became the Jade and Baby Ashworth show. People forgot why they were there. It was all cooing over potential baby names, congratulations for Jade, fawning over her glow. My mom, to her credit, kept shooting me worried glances and tried to steer the conversation back to me a few times, but even she got swept up in the baby excitement. Richard, my stepdad, seemed to have entirely forgotten it was my birthday at all. He was beaming at Jade, patting her shoulder, already a doting grandpa-to-be. The bitterness I felt was a sharp, physical ache. My own dad passed away when I was 10, from a sudden heart attack. He would never have let this happen. He would have made sure I was the star of my own birthday. The thought of him, and how much he was missing, made Jade's spotlight stealing even more unbearable. I retreated to a corner with my friends, quietly nursing a slice of my, now largely ignored, book cake. I didn't touch Jade's gender reveal monstrosity. The sight of it made me sick. After about 45 minutes of this charade, I couldn't take it anymore. "Guys," I whispered to my friends, "let's bail. 6th Street is calling." We made our excuses, said our goodbyes. Jade barely noticed, too busy holding court, and escaped. The bar was a welcome distraction. My friends were amazing, showering me with attention, making me laugh, doing everything they could to salvage my night. And eventually, I did start to feel better. But the anger, the humiliation, it didn't disappear. It settled deep in my bones, a simmering resentment. Jade had ruined a once-in-a-lifetime milestone, turning it into a showcase for herself. It wasn't just forgivable. It was a declaration of war. And I knew with absolute certainty that I would get her back. Sooner or later, opportunity knocked just 2 days later. Jade, still basking in the afterglow of her party hijack, announced that Liam had proposed. She flashed a gaudy diamond ring, and of course, our parents were thrilled. They immediately decided to throw Jade and Liam an official engagement party. A real party this time, not a hijacked one. A wave of jealous fury washed over me. Here she was being celebrated again for getting knocked up and engaged, while my 18th birthday, a day that should have been mine alone, was already a forgotten footnote. The injustice of it all was galling. And in that moment, a plan began to form, a deliciously wicked little seed of an idea. She'd ruined my special day. Fine, I'd return the favor with interest. The engagement party was a week later, held at a swanky downtown Austin restaurant, Maddie's at Green Pastures, known for its peacocks roaming the grounds and its southern elegance. It was a much grander affair than my home-based birthday. Our parents had gone all out, engraved invitations, a string quartet, an open bar, which Jade, naturally, couldn't partake in. All our family friends were there, plus Liam's entire extended family and his circle of friends. I was on my best behavior all week leading up to it, and on the day itself. Sweet, supportive Maya. I complimented Jade's dress, a hideous mint green monstrosity that did nothing for her complexion. I gushed over her ring. I even made polite small talk with Liam's bewildered-looking parents. I needed everyone, especially my mom and Richard, to believe I was over the birthday incident, that I was genuinely happy for Jade. The last thing I needed was for them to suspect my true intentions and try to stop me. Gaslighting them and believing I was the picture of sisterly love was a necessary evil. The evening progressed smoothly. Champagne flowed. For most, canopies circulated, and Jade held court, recounting her romantic proposal story with dramatic flair. Then, just before the main course was served, Richard stood up to make a toast. He spoke glowingly of Jade, of Liam, of new beginnings. It was all very heartwarming, if you didn't know the undercurrents. Then, to everyone's surprise, especially my family's, I stood up. "I'd like to propose a toast as well," I announced, my voice clear and steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. A hush fell over the room. Me toasting Jade? This was unheard of. I could see the curious, slightly alarmed looks on my mom's and Richard's faces. Jade herself looked momentarily startled, then a smug, self-satisfied expression settled on her face. She probably thought I was about to offer a gushing public apology for existing in her spotlight. "To Jade and Liam," I began, raising my glass of sparkling cider. I even managed a few genuinely nice, if carefully chosen, words about Jade. Things like, "Jade has always known what she wants, and she's never afraid to go after it," which, in retrospect, was dripping with irony only I appreciated. I had to build a foundation of sincerity before I dropped the bomb. "But to truly understand Jade," I continued, my voice taking on a more narrative tone, and the depth of her commitment, not just to Liam, but to family planning, you have to go back a few months. I saw a flicker of unease in Jade's eyes. Mom looked confused. I happened to overhear a rather intense conversation between Jade and my mom. Shortly after Jade found out she was pregnant, I said, my gaze sweeping the room, making eye contact with Liam's parents, with his friends, with everyone. I was in the same room, headphones on, but the music stopped, and what I heard was illuminating. Jade was starting to look pale. Liam looked intrigued. You see, I went on, my voice dripping with feigned sympathy. Jade wasn't quite as thrilled about the pregnancy as she appeared. In fact, she was terrified. She told Mom she didn't feel ready, mentally or physically, that she was only putting on a brave face for Liam because she didn't want to disappoint him. A low murmur went through the room. Jade shot me a look of pure venom. I pressed on. She even confessed, my voice dropped conspiratorially, that she had serious doubts about Liam. She felt he was too immature, too irresponsible to be a father, that he wasn't even ready to commit to her with marriage, so how could he possibly commit to a baby? She was essentially complaining that after 6 years together, Liam still hadn't proposed, even with a baby on the way. Liam's face was a study in dawning horror. His parents looked aghast. Jade actually told Mom, I delivered the killing blow, my voice ringing with false sincerity, that if Liam didn't propose by the end of her first trimester she would, and I quote, break up with him and terminate the pregnancy. You could have heard a pin drop. The silence was absolute, thick with shock and disbelief. Jade looked like she was about to faint. Liam's face was turning a concerning shade of puce. But, I exclaimed, raising my glass higher, a bright, almost manic smile on my face. Look where we are now. Liam did come around. He proposed. And Jade, you stuck it out. You both made it. It just goes to show that time, and perhaps a little ultimatum, can fix anything. You've proven that love and a well-timed proposal can conquer all. To Jade and Liam, may your future be as eventful and surprising as your journey here. I took a large sip of my cider, my eyes locking with Jade's. The mask of the happy, glowing fiancé had shattered, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated fury and humiliation. My job there was done. The rest of the room was in stunned silence. Then, slowly, a few people hesitantly raised their glasses. Most, however, just stared, open-mouthed, at Jade and Liam. Only Jade, Mom, Richard, and I knew the absolute devastating truth of my inspirational speech. To everyone else it sounded like a slightly awkward, overly revealing, but ultimately well-intentioned toast. But the damage, I knew, was done. The seed of doubt, the whispered truth of Jade's manipulative tactics, had been planted. The immediate aftermath of my toast was a study in controlled chaos. No one screamed, no one threw a drink, though Jade looked like she was sorely tempted. Instead, a thick, uncomfortable silence descended, punctuated by nervous coughs and the clinking of silverware as people suddenly found their appetizers fascinating. Liam looked like he'd been poleaxed. His parents were exchanging horrified, whispered glances. Jade, after shooting me a look that could curdle milk, burst into tears and fled the private dining room, Liam trailing uncertainly after her. My mom and Richard were at my side in an instant, their faces a mixture of fury and disbelief. Maya, what in God's name do you think you were doing? Richard hissed, his voice low and dangerous. That was cruel, Maya. Unforgivable, Mom added, her eyes flashing with a disappointment that stung more than Richard's anger. Was it? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady, or was it just truth? The same kind of truth Jade so generously shared at my 18th birthday party by turning it into her gender reveal. They didn't have an immediate answer for that. The party, needless to say, imploded. Guests made hasty, awkward excuses and began to leave. The string quartet trailed off mid-sonata. The five-star meal was largely uneaten. It was a disaster, a beautiful, expensive, peacock-adorned disaster, and a tiny vindictive part of me reveled in it. Later that night, back at our house, the real storm broke. Jade, having been coaxed back from wherever she'd fled to, probably the ladies' room to repair her tear-streaked makeup and plot my demise, was incandescent with rage. Liam was quiet, withdrawn, his earlier joy completely extinguished. "I knew, bitch," Jade shrieked at me, all pretense of Southern belle decorum gone. "You deliberately tried to ruin my life, my engagement, my relationship. Did I?" I countered calmly. "Or did I just shed a little light on the complexities of your relationship? The things you conveniently forgot to mention to Liam, or his family." The argument raged for hours. Mom and Richard tried to mediate, but they were clearly on Jade's side. They couldn't see, or wouldn't see, the years of her subtle, and not so subtle bullying, the constant put-downs, the spotlight stealing. To them, Jade was the pregnant, emotional victim, and I was the jealous, vindictive troublemaker. The gaslighting was intense. They kept insisting I had misunderstood the conversation I'd overheard, that I was exaggerating, that Jade would never say such things. She definitely did mean it, I stated, my voice firm. I saw her face. I heard her tone. She was dead serious. And Liam deserved to know the kind of pressure she was putting on him, the kind of ultimatum she'd given. "This is why your mother and I want you to apologize, Maya," Richard said, his tone stern. To Jade. To Liam. "You need to tell them you exaggerated, that Jade didn't mean what she said. You need to fix this." "Apologize?" I scoffed. "I owe Jade nothing. Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. She spent the last 4 years making my life miserable, and she humiliated me on my 18th birthday. This was just leveling the playing field." That's when Mom dropped her own bomb. "Maya, if you don't apologize, if you don't try to make amends for this, you can kiss your college fund goodbye." My blood ran cold. My college fund. It was a substantial amount. Money my dad had left specifically for my education before he passed away, managed by my mom. I was supposed to start at the University of Texas at Austin in a few months. Without that fund, I'd be lost, scrambling for loans, my dreams of a good education in jeopardy. This wasn't just a threat, it was emotional blackmail. This was them trying to force my codependency on their approval. "You wouldn't," I whispered, looking at my mother, the woman who was supposed to protect me. "Try me," she said, her expression hard, mirroring the one she'd worn when I told her about Jade's birthday hijack. "Jade is pregnant. She has enough on her plate. What you did was seriously juvenile, and you will pay the price if you don't make it right." The injustice of it all was suffocating. Jade makes my milestone birthday all about her, and it's a minor inconvenience. I reveal a verifiable, damaging truth about her manipulative behavior, and I'm the villain who needs to be punished. The double standard was staggering. For a few days, I was in turmoil. I didn't want to apologize. I felt I'd done nothing wrong, that Jade deserved what she got. But the thought of losing my college fund, of derailing my future, it was terrifying. This was learned helplessness in action. They were trying to make me feel powerless, to force my compliance through fear. Then, I remembered my grandparents, my dad's parents. They lived in Fredericksburg, a couple of hours away, but we were close. I called them sobbing and told them everything. From Jade's years of bullying, to the birthday party hijack, to my revenge toast, to Mom's threat about the college fund. Grandma, a fiery woman with a no-nonsense attitude, was livid. "She what? Threatened your college fund? The money your father left for you?" "Oh hell no, Maya, that's not happening." It turned out, Mom was bluffing. Legally, she couldn't withhold that money from me. My dad's will had been very specific. It was mine for my education. My grandparents had a copy of the will and spoke to their lawyer, who confirmed it. The relief that washed over me was immense. Mom's biggest leverage was gone. Armed with this knowledge, I made my decision. I wasn't going to apologize. I wasn't going to grovel. And I certainly wasn't going to let Jade or my mother dictate my life anymore. I was drawing a boundary, firm and unyielding. I told my mom and Richard my decision. Mom was furious. Richard was disappointed. Jade, I heard, was gloating to anyone who would listen that she and Liam were stronger than ever despite my pathetic attempts to break them up. Though I also heard through the grapevine that their relationship was rockier than the Texas Hill Country. The atmosphere at home became unbearable. Mom was cold and curt. Richard stopped speaking to me altogether. It was clear they'd chosen their side, and it wasn't mine. Jade was the blameless victim, and I was the villain. Fine. If they wanted a villain, I'd play the part. It was time for me to get the hell out. With my grandparents' full support, I packed my bags. When Mom realized I was serious about leaving, she made a last-ditch effort to assert control. "You're not taking that laptop," she said, pointing to the MacBook she'd gifted me for Christmas. "I paid for that." "Fine," I said, leaving it on my desk. It was a small price to pay for my freedom. It sucked that she didn't seem to care that I was leaving, only about a material object, but it was just another confirmation that her priorities had shifted long ago. She was Richard's wife first, Jade's stepmother second, and my mother a distant third. Moving in with my grandparents was like breathing fresh air after being trapped in a smoke-filled room. They were loving, supportive, and unequivocally on my side. They understood the dynamics of a narcissistic stepsister and a mother who had perhaps become lost in her new family, prioritizing it over the child from her previous life. Jade, true to form, couldn't resist a final dig. She texted me the night I moved out, a gloating message about how, despite my best efforts, she and Liam were still together, and I was the one who had lost my family. It was a particularly cruel jab, implying I was now fatherless and motherless. My dad's death from Parkinson's 2 years prior was still a raw wound, and for her to weaponize it, it was disgusting. It solidified every negative feeling I'd ever had about her. She wasn't just selfish, she was heartless. My parents had divorced when I was 4, but they'd co-parented amicably. Dad was the fun one, my rock. Losing him was the hardest thing I'd ever been through. Mom, she'd tried, but after she married Richard, her focus shifted. Our already tenuous bond frayed further. Jade's text, in a twisted way, was right. I had lost the only parent I had left, not to death, but to indifference and a new family she deemed more important. It hurt, deeply. But living with my grandparents, surrounded by their unconditional love, and the support of my aunt, Dad's older sister, and my amazing friends, I started to heal. I began to understand that their inability to see Jade's flaws, their willingness to sacrifice my well-being for her comfort, was their failing, not mine. A couple of months later I started college at UT Austin. It was everything I'd hoped for, challenging, exciting, a fresh start. I threw myself into my studies, made new friends, and importantly, started therapy. Unpacking years of stepsister rivalry, of feeling like an outsider in my own home, of dealing with a mother who had emotionally checked out. It was a lot, but it was necessary. I didn't speak to Mom, Richard, or Jade again. I blocked them on all platforms. They made no effort to reach out either. And you know what? I was okay with that. More than okay. I was thriving. I had my chosen family, my grandparents, my aunt, my friends, people who loved me for who I was, who had my back, no questions asked. My revenge on Jade hadn't been about destroying her relationship with Liam, though last I heard, it was still on shaky ground, the trust irrevocably damaged. It had been about exposing her true nature, about refusing to be her punching bag any longer. It had been about reclaiming my own voice, my own power. And in the end, the biggest consequence wasn't the temporary chaos at her engagement party, but the permanent severing of ties with a part of my family that had become toxic. Sometimes I still feel a pang of sadness for the mother-daughter relationship I never truly had. But I've learned that you can't force love, and you can't change people who don't want to change. All you can do is protect yourself, build your own happiness, and surround yourself with people who lift you up. And that's exactly what I did. Jade could have her spotlight. I was busy building a life filled with genuine light. And that, I realized, was the most epic win of all. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, go ahead and give it a like. It really helps me out. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future videos. Thanks a bunch!